Hannah, the woman who prayed until heaven moved. She wasn't a queen. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a prophetess who stood before kings, or a judge who commanded armies, or a woman whose bravery could be measured in acts of courage the world could see and celebrate. She was a woman who wanted a child. That was all. That was everything. She sat at the edges of celebrations she couldn't enjoy. She watched other women hold babies she couldn't have. She went to the house of God year after year after year, not with a testimony of breakthrough, but with the same ache, the same empty arms, the same wound that hadn't healed. She wept when others feasted. She prayed when others gave up. She kept showing up to a God who seemed, from the outside, to be silent. And yet, what God was doing in the hidden years of Hannah's waiting was not nothing. It was everything. Because the child Hannah was crying out for was not just going to fill her arms. He was going to change the entire course of Israel's history. He was going to be the last judge and the first kingmaker. He was going to anoint David. He was going to stand at the hinge point of an entire era. And before any of that could happen, before the nation could be repositioned, before the monarchy could begin, before the story of Israel could move into its next chapter, a woman had to pray. A broken, barren, overlooked woman had to go to God with her whole heart and refuse to stop. Her name was Hannah. And this is not just the story of a woman who finally got what she asked for. This is the story of how a private prayer in a public temple unlocked a public miracle that changed the world. A land in the wrong season. To understand Hannah's story, you have to understand the world she lived in. The time of the judges was coming to an end. For generations, Israel had been governed not by kings, but by judges, men and women raised up by God in times of crisis to deliver his people from oppression. Deborah, Gideon, Samson. These were the leaders God had used, extraordinary individuals called for extraordinary moments. But the system was fraying. The cycle of sin, suffering, crying out, and rescue that had defined the period of the judges had ground Israel down spiritually. The people were inconsistent. Their devotion ran hot and cold. Without a strong, centralized leadership, the nation drifted repeatedly into compromise and collapse. And the priesthood was no better. At the Tabernacle in Shiloh, the central place of worship for Israel, the tent where the Ark of God resided, the sons of Eli, the high priest, were conducting themselves with shocking wickedness. Hophni and Phinehas were corrupt men who stole from the sacrifices, who treated the offerings of God with contempt, who slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tabernacle. The spiritual leadership of Israel was rotten at its core. God was grieved, and an entire era was about to end. But before the new thing could begin, before the era of the kings, before David, before the Golden Age, something had to happen at the level of intercession. Someone had to pray it into being. Someone had to stand in the gap between what was and what God intended. And God found that person not among the priests, not among the judges, not among the leaders or the officials or the men of renown. He found her in a family in Ramah, a woman with an aching heart and empty arms. And he gave her a burden she didn't fully understand. The house of Elkanah. Hannah's husband was a man named Elkanah from the tribe of Ephraim. By the standards of his world, Elkanah was a good man. He was devout. He made his annual pilgrimage to Shiloh to worship and offer sacrifices as the law required. He was faithful in his religious duties. He honored God with his life. He also had 2 wives. Polygamy in the ancient world was a social reality, tolerated by the culture, though never endorsed by God's design from the beginning. And wherever polygamy existed in the Bible, the same pattern appears with painful consistency: rivalry, jealousy, heartbreak. Hannah was Elkanah's first wife, and Hannah was barren. The other wife was named Peninnah, and Peninnah had children. The contrast between them would have been visible in every shared space they occupied. Peninnah's children laughed and cried and grew and filled the household with the noise of life. Hannah's side of the home was quiet, with a quiet that isn't peaceful, the quiet of absence, of longing, of a space that should be filled but isn't. Elkanah loved Hannah. The text makes this clear. He gave her a double portion at the sacrificial meal. He treated her with special tenderness. He didn't love her less because she couldn't give him children. In that culture, in that world, that was no small thing. But Elkanah's love, as real and genuine as it was, could not give Hannah what she needed most. And Peninnah made sure Hannah never forgot it. The adversary in the home. Peninnah provoked her. The Bible uses that word deliberately. It wasn't passive. It wasn't accidental. Peninnah made a choice, repeatedly, to dig her fingers into Hannah's wound. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. Year after year, when the family went up to Shiloh to worship, Peninnah would provoke Hannah until she wept and couldn't eat. Imagine what that looked like. The pilgrimage to Shiloh was supposed to be a sacred journey, a time of worship, of offering, of encounter with God. And every year, on the way there, or at the very place of worship, Peninnah would find the moment to twist the knife. Maybe it was a comment about how the children needed to be organized for the journey. Maybe it was a pointed observation about who would carry on the family name. Maybe it was a look, a tone, a knowing smile in front of others. We don't know exactly what she said, but we know its effect. Hannah wept. Hannah couldn't eat, and the place that should have been her greatest comfort, the house of God, the site of sacrifice and prayer, became associated year after year with her deepest pain. Elkanah, watching his beloved wife dissolve into grief, said the words that loving people sometimes say when they don't know what else to offer. "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" He meant well. He loved her, but no. His love, as beautiful as it was, could not fill the empty space inside her. Not because he wasn't enough as a man or a husband, but because the longing for a child is its own particular ache, rooted in a purpose God had placed inside her, and no human relationship could satisfy it. Hannah had to take that longing somewhere else. She had to take it to God. The prayer that changed everything. 1 year after the meal in Shiloh, Hannah rose up. She had been weeping. She hadn't eaten. Her soul was in bitterness, the scripture says. A bitterness of soul so deep it had become a physical weight. But this year, something was different. This year, Hannah didn't just grieve, she prayed. She went to the Tabernacle. She stood before the Lord. And she began to pray with a fervor so raw, so desperate, so completely unguarded, that she must have looked strange to any observer. Her lips were moving, but her voice made no sound. She was pouring out everything, every year of waiting, every tear, every sleepless night, every time Peninnah's words had found their mark, every year of going to the house of God with empty arms, every prayer that seemed to have returned unanswered. She was pouring all of it out before God in silence. And she made a vow. Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. Read that vow slowly, because it is extraordinary. Hannah was not praying selfishly. She wasn't just asking for a child to ease her own pain, to give her status, to silence Peninnah, to fill the emptiness in her home. She was asking for a son to give away. She was asking for a child with the full intention of returning him to God. The thing she wanted most, the very answer to her deepest longing, she was committing to surrender before she even received it. This is not ordinary prayer. This is the prayer of a woman who has been broken open so completely that even her most personal desire has been transformed into an offering. Hannah was not bargaining with God. She was aligning herself with something larger than her own longing. She was saying, God, whatever you give me, it belongs to you. My arms are not the final destination. Your purposes are. This is what years of unanswered prayer had produced in her. Not bitterness that closed her off from God, but a surrender so complete that she was ready to receive and release in the same breath. Eli's mistake and God's grace. While Hannah was praying with this abandoned, silent, trembling fervor, the old priest Eli was watching her from his seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle. He watched her lips moving. He watched her body swaying with the emotion of her prayer. He heard no voice. He saw a woman in obvious distress at the entrance of the holy place, and he made the most understandable of misinterpretations. He thought she was drunk. "How long are you going to stay drunk?" he said to her. "Put away your wine." In any other moment, this might have been a devastating accusation. To be confronted by the high priest at the door of God's house and be accused of drunkenness while you are in the middle of the most desperate prayer of your life, this would have broken many people. Hannah didn't break. She answered him with quiet dignity. "Not so, my Lord. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." There is something powerful in how Hannah speaks here. She doesn't collapse. She doesn't flee in embarrassment. She doesn't stop praying and go home. She explains herself with composure and clarity. She holds her ground. She tells the truth about where she is and what she's doing, and Eli, to his credit, receives it. "Go in peace," he said, "and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." Those words from the priest, words he may have spoken out of routine pastoral care, Words that may have cost him nothing in that moment carried the weight of prophetic blessing over Hannah's life. May the God of Israel grant you what you have asked. Hannah received those words. May your servant find favor in your eyes, she replied. And then she left, and she ate, and her face was no longer downcast. Before the child came, the grief lifted. Before the prayer was answered, the peace arrived. Hannah had released something in that tabernacle. She had laid it down, truly laid it down, not just said the words, but actually let it go. And the release brought a freedom her soul had been waiting for. This is what true prayer does. It doesn't just ask God to change circumstances, it changes us in the asking. The morning worship and the remembered woman. The next morning, Elkanah and Hannah rose early. They worshipped before the Lord, and then they returned home to Ramah. The scripture says something simple and profound in the space of a single sentence. Elkanah lay with Hannah his wife, and the Lord remembered her. The Lord remembered her. That phrase, the Lord remembered, appears at critical moments throughout Scripture. God remembered Noah in the ark. God remembered Abraham and rescued Lot from Sodom. God remembered Rachel when she was barren and she conceived. To say God remembered is not to say he had forgotten. God does not forget. But in the language of the Bible, to be remembered by God is to be brought into the active focus of his attention and care. It is the moment when what has been held in the divine awareness moves into divine action. God had always seen Hannah. He had always known her name. He had always heard every prayer, every silent tear, every year of going to Shiloh with empty arms. And now he moved. In due time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, because, she said, I asked the Lord for him. The name Samuel in Hebrew sounds like the phrase heard by God or asked of God. Every time someone said his name, every time his mother called him in for dinner, every time a neighbor greeted him in the street, every time a teacher addressed him, the story of his origin was embedded in the sound of it. You are the answer to a mother's prayer. You are proof that God hears. You are the evidence that waiting is not the same as being forgotten. The dedication and the surrender. Hannah did not go to Shiloh the following year. She told Elkanah, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." Elkanah agreed. "Do what seems best to you," he said. And so Hannah stayed home. She nursed Samuel. She held him. She rocked him to sleep. She watched his first smiles. She heard his first words. She felt his small hand curl around her finger. She memorized him, the weight of him, the sound of him, the miracle of him. She had prayed for this. She had waited for this. And she knew that every moment she held him was borrowed time, because she had made a vow. And Hannah was a woman who kept her vows. When Samuel was weaned, likely around 3 years old, when children in the ancient world were considered stable enough to begin education, Hannah gathered what she needed: a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, a skin of wine. And she took her son to Shiloh, to the Tabernacle, to Eli the priest, to bring him to the house of God and leave him there. Think about what this required of her. Not just the act itself, the physical reality of handing over a 3-year-old child to the care of a priest in a tabernacle and walking away. That alone is staggering to imagine. But the entire weight of it, the years of praying, the years of waiting, the year of carrying him in her body, the years of nursing him, raising him, loving him, the years of her entire soul being wrapped around this boy, and now, the moment she had always known was coming. She stood before Eli, and she said, "Pardon me, my lord. As surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord. I give him to the Lord, not I am lending him to the Lord, not I am contributing him temporarily to the Lord. I give him for his whole life." The vow was complete. Hannah worshipped God, and she left her son in the house of God and went home. The song that shook the centuries. Before she left, Hannah prayed, or rather, Hannah sang. What poured out of her at that moment of surrender was not a lament. It was not a grief-stricken farewell. It was a proclamation so theologically rich, so prophetically bold, so far ahead of its own time, that it would echo through centuries and shape the worship of God's people for generations. This is Hannah's prayer. My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Read that prayer and feel the weight of it. Hannah was a woman who had been barren, overlooked, provoked, and grief-stricken. She had never held a military command. She had never sat on a throne. She had never debated theology in the courts of scholars. She was a woman from Ramah, with a 3-year-old son she was leaving at the Tabernacle. And she sang about the resurrection of the dead. She sang about God's power to reverse the fortunes of the poor and the proud. She sang about a king and an anointed one, at a time when Israel had no king, before the monarchy had even begun. She sang with a prophetic clarity that stretched hundreds of years into the future and touched the life of the very king her son would one day anoint. Scholars have noted for centuries that Hannah's prayer is the template for Mary's Magnificat, the song Mary sang when she discovered she was pregnant with Jesus. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. Sound familiar? Mary was singing Hannah's song, because Hannah's God is Mary's God. the God who reverses, the God who exalts the lowly, the God who fills the empty, the God who gives life where there was only waiting. Both women had received something miraculous. Both women had surrendered the gift back to God. And both women responded to that surrender, not with grief, but with a song about the nature of God that transcended their own personal story and declared something eternal about the character of the one who heard their prayers. This is what happens when a person is broken open by God. They stop singing only about themselves and start singing about Him. The yearly coat. Here is the part of Hannah's story that undoes me every time. After she left Samuel at Shiloh, she went home. Every year, when Elkanah and the family made their annual pilgrimage to worship, Hannah would bring Samuel a little coat she had made. A little coat, sewn with her own hands, made to the size he would be when she would see him next, measured by a mother's intuition and a mother's love and a mother's need to do something tangible with the longing she carried. A little coat. She couldn't be with him every day. She couldn't tuck him in at night. She couldn't be there when he scraped his knee, or when he cried, or when he laughed at something funny. She couldn't hear him say her name on the ordinary Tuesday mornings that make up a childhood. But she could sew a coat. She could put her hands to work on something that would touch him, that would keep him warm, that would carry some part of her care into the days she wasn't there. Every year, a little coat. Every year, a mother's love translated into thread and fabric. Every year, evidence that Hannah had not forgotten, that Hannah would never forget. And every year, Eli would bless Elkanah and Hannah. May the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord. And God did. Hannah conceived again, and again, and again. She had 3 more sons and 2 daughters. 6 children in all, including Samuel. She who had been barren now had a household full of life. The Lord had indeed remembered her. The boy who heard God's voice. Samuel grew up in the house of the Lord. He ministered before Eli the priest. He wore a linen ephod, the garment of priestly service. He learned the rhythms of the tabernacle, the rituals of sacrifice, the patterns of worship. And one night, in the darkness of the tabernacle, something happened that had not happened in a long time. The scripture tells us, in those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. The spiritual atmosphere of Israel was dry. God had not been speaking with clarity. The prophetic voice was muted. The heavens seemed closed. And then, in the still of the night, a voice called, "Samuel." The boy woke up and ran to Eli, thinking the old priest had called him. "Here I am," he said. "You called me." "I didn't call," Eli said. "Go back and lie down." It happened again. "Samuel." Again the boy ran to Eli. "Here I am. You called me." "I didn't call you, my son. Lie down again." A third time. "Samuel."
"Here I am. You called me."
By now, Eli understood. "Go and lie down," he said, "and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down. And the Lord came and stood and called as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And God spoke. For the first time in years, the silence broke. The word of the Lord came, not to Eli, the aging high priest, not to one of the experienced spiritual leaders of Israel, not to a warrior or a judge or a man of renown. It came to a boy who was in the house of God because his mother had prayed him there. A boy who wore a little coat his mother made him every year. A boy who existed because a broken woman refused to stop praying. The weight of Hannah's intercession. Let's pause here and feel the weight of something important. Samuel became one of the most significant figures in the entire Old Testament. He was the last of the judges. He was the transition point between the era of the judges and the era of the kings. He anointed Saul as Israel's first king. He later anointed David, the man after God's own heart, who would sit on a throne whose line would extend to Jesus Christ himself. The entire sweep of Israel's history from Samuel's birth forward was shaped by the decisions Samuel made, the words Samuel spoke, the leaders Samuel anointed. And Samuel only existed because Hannah prayed. Not because she had power or position, not because she prayed from a place of strength or abundance. She prayed from poverty of spirit, from emptiness, from years of unanswered longing. She prayed from the floor of her life. And what came out of that prayer shaped the next 1,000 years of God's redemptive plan. This is the theology of intercession that Hannah's story reveals. The prayers of the ordinary, the broken, the overlooked, the barren. Those prayers do not go unheard. They are not background noise. They are not wishful thinking. They are not spoken into a void. They are heard by a God who has purposes in mind that the person praying cannot begin to see. Hannah was not praying for Israel's future. She was praying for her own longing. But God heard the longing and answered it in a way that served something infinitely larger than Hannah's own need. That is how God works with prayer. You bring him your small, personal, desperate cry, and he answers it in ways that reverberate through history. The things that closed Hannah's womb. There is a phrase in Hannah's story that is uncomfortable but necessary. The Lord had closed her womb. Not Satan, not illness, not bad luck, not a random biological misfortune. The Lord had closed her womb. Twice the text says this, clearly, deliberately. And this raises the question that every person who has ever suffered asks at some point. Why would a good God allow this? Why would God deliberately withhold the very thing a person longs for most? Why close the womb of a woman who wanted a child? There is no answer in the text that makes it painless, but there is a pattern in the text that makes it meaningful. Sarah was barren before Isaac was born, the son of promise, the child through whom all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Rebekah was barren before Jacob and Esau, before the 12 tribes of Israel existed. Rachel was barren before Joseph, before the man who would save the world from famine. And Hannah was barren before Samuel, before the prophet who would anoint the kings. In every case, God closed the womb of a woman who was meant to carry something significant. Not because he was cruel, not because he was indifferent to her pain, but because the child who would come from that womb was going to be unmistakably his. When Isaac was born, everyone knew only God could have done this. When Joseph was born, everyone knew this child is not the product of human strategy. When Samuel was born, everyone knew this boy's existence is an answered prayer. There is a purpose in the waiting that cannot be seen from inside the waiting. The closed womb was not a punishment, it was a preparation. It was God setting the stage for a birth so clearly miraculous that no one could attribute it to anything but him. When Samuel walked into a room, his origin story walked with him. He was a child of prayer, a child of surrender, a child born to a mother who had given him to God before she even held him. That kind of origin shapes a life. Peninnah, the adversary and the assignment. We cannot tell Hannah's story honestly without spending a moment with Peninnah, because Peninnah is in every story. Not always as a rival wife, not always as a person who mocks and provokes, but there is always someone or something in the life of a person who is walking through a season of waiting that presses on the wound with cruel consistency. Sometimes Peninnah is a relationship. Sometimes Peninnah is a comparison, the social media scroll that shows you everyone else's full arms when yours are empty. The announcement in church, the pregnancy reveal at the family dinner, the question, "When are you having kids?" from someone who doesn't know what those words cost. Sometimes Peninnah is a voice inside your own head, the accuser who uses your own longing as a weapon, who tells you that you are forgotten, that God has passed you by, that everyone else gets what you can't seem to receive. The Bible says Peninnah provoked Hannah year after year. Not once, not occasionally, year after year, until Hannah wept and could not eat. This is an important detail, because it means that the pain was not resolved quickly. It means that Hannah had to make a decision year after year about what to do with the wound that kept being reopened. She could have become bitter. She could have turned the pain inward and let it harden her. She could have decided that God was not good, that prayer was pointless, that worship at Shiloh was a performance she was no longer willing to maintain. She didn't. Year after year, she kept going. Year after year, she brought her broken heart to the house of God. Year after year, she sat in the wound and refused to let it define her as someone abandoned by God. That is not passivity. That is not weakness. That is one of the most ferocious forms of faith that exists. The faith that says, "I don't understand what you are doing. I don't see how this ends. I cannot explain why you have not yet answered. But I am still here. I am still coming. I am still bringing you everything I have, even when everything I have is just my tears." That is the faith that moves heaven. Barren women and the purposes of God. There is a thread that runs through the entire Bible, connecting women whose wombs were closed with some of the most important births in human history. Sarah gave birth to Isaac, the child of promise, the heir of the covenant, the son through whom all the nations of the earth would be blessed. Rebekah, after 20 years of barrenness, gave birth to Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Rachel gave birth to Joseph, the dreamer, the one sold into slavery and raised to power, the man whose life foreshadowed the life of Jesus Christ. The mother of Samson was barren before she gave birth to Israel's most famous judge and warrior, and Hannah gave birth to Samuel. And when you trace that line all the way forward, you find that it ends not with barrenness, but with a birth in a manger in Bethlehem, announced by an angel to a young woman who had never known a man. Mary was not technically barren, but her womb too was closed to the conventional means of conception. And when heaven opened it, what came out changed everything. God has a long history of doing his most significant work through wombs that human logic would have written off. He has a long history of choosing the ones who were waiting, the ones who were overlooked, the ones whose longing had been denied long enough to be purified. He has a long history of looking at the empty place and deciding, that is exactly where I will put the fullness of my purpose. What Hannah teaches us about prayer. Hannah's prayer in the Tabernacle is not just a story about a woman asking for a baby. It is a masterclass in what real prayer looks like. First, Hannah brought her whole self. She didn't show up at the tabernacle with polished, presentable prayer. She came with grief, with tears, with a soul so troubled that the priest thought she was drunk. She did not clean herself up before she came to God. She came as she was, wrecked, desperate, unable to eat, pouring out bitterness. God is not looking for performance in prayer. He is looking for honesty. He is looking for the version of you that has stopped trying to appear composed and is simply standing before him with everything exposed. Second, Hannah prayed with specificity. She asked for a son, not for something good to happen, not for a sense of peace about my situation, not for vague blessing in a general direction. She named her request. She made it specific. She held it up before God with clarity and directness. There is a version of prayer that stays vague because it is afraid to be disappointed. If you never ask for anything specific, you can never be told no. Hannah refused that version of prayer. She asked for what she wanted, knowing that she might not receive it. Third, Hannah prayed with surrender. The vow she made to give the child back to God if she received him was not a negotiating tactic. It was not spiritual manipulation. It was the natural overflow of a heart that had been broken open to the point of complete surrender. She was saying, God, I want this, but even my wanting it belongs to you. Even the answer to this prayer is not mine to keep. Whatever you give me, I offer back. This is the prayer posture that heaven responds to. Not the prayer that says, give me what I want so I can possess it, but the prayer that says, give me what is yours so I can steward it for your purposes. Fourth, Hannah prayed and then she acted. After she prayed, she ate. She worshipped. She went home with her husband. She had done what she could do. She had brought everything to God. Now she lived her life. She didn't camp in the tabernacle. She didn't stop functioning while she waited. She prayed, she surrendered, and she moved forward with faith that God had heard. The combination of passionate, specific, surrendered prayer, followed by faithful, obedient living, is the rhythm of a life that sees God move. The little coat and the big God. Come back with me, one more time, to that image of the yearly coat. A mother who has given her son to the Lord. A mother who cannot be with him every day. A mother who sews him a coat. It is such a small thing, such an ordinary thing, but it is the most human detail in the entire story of Hannah. And it reveals something about her that no theological exposition fully captures. She was still his mother. She had surrendered him to God. She had meant every word of her vow. She did not regret it, but she was still, in the most basic and irreducible sense, Samuel's mother. She counted the months between visits. She estimated how much he had grown. She put her hands to the work of love, the needle and thread, the careful measuring, the prayer woven into every stitch. She could not hold him every day, but she could send something that would hold him. She could not speak to him every night, but she could wrap him in something that carried her love. And I think God looked at that little coat year after year and was moved. Because this is what it looks like to trust God with the thing you love most. Not the absence of love, not the pretense that it doesn't hurt, but the ongoing, faithful, thread-by-thread expression of love that doesn't clutch and doesn't control, that lets the beloved be where God has placed him, while still pouring love into every small act of care it can offer. This is what it looks like to be a person who has truly surrendered. Not cold, not distant, not pretending. Warm, present, still sewing coats, still sending love into the space where you cannot go, still trusting God to be the parent you cannot be in the moments you cannot be there. The prayer that echoes forward. When Mary learned she was pregnant with the Son of God, she visited her cousin Elizabeth, and Elizabeth, filled with the Holy Spirit, cried out, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear." And Mary began to sing, "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Saviour, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty." Listen to the echo. Hannah had sung, "Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more." Hannah had sung, "He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap." Hannah had sung, "The Lord brings death and makes alive." Mary was not inventing a new theology. She was continuing a song that had begun in a tabernacle in Shiloh, on the lips of a barren woman who had finally received the child she had prayed for and was now giving him back. The song of the barren woman and the song of the Virgin Mother. The same God, the same reversal, the same conviction that he who makes the empty full, who lifts the lowly, who answers the desperate cry, that God had not changed, could not change, would never change. And what Mary carried in her womb, the one who would be the fulfillment of every promise, the answer to every prayer, the final and complete reversal of every curse, was in some mysterious and profound sense connected to what Hannah had prayed in Shiloh all those centuries before. The God who heard Hannah prepared the world for the God who would come to it. The prayer of a barren woman helped set the stage for the birth that would change everything. For the ones who are still waiting. This part of the message is for someone specific. You know who you are. You are the person who has been praying the same prayer for longer than you want to count. You are the person who has done everything right, who has cried out to God with everything you have, who has brought your longing to the house of God year after year, and the answer still hasn't come. You are the person who has watched others receive what you have prayed for, who has smiled at the announcements and celebrations while carrying something inside you that no one else can see. You are the person who is starting to wonder if God has forgotten, if the silence means no, if the waiting means you are somehow disqualified. Hannah's story is for you, not as a promise that you will receive exactly what you have asked for in exactly the way you have imagined it, but as a testimony that God hears, that the closed womb is not the final word, that the years of waiting are not years of abandonment, they are years of preparation for something that is going to be unmistakably God. That prayer in the darkness, prayer through tears, prayer when your lips move and your voice makes no sound, that prayer reaches heaven. That there is a day, a specific, chosen, divinely appointed day when God will remember you. Not because he forgot and then was reminded, but because in the fullness of his time and purpose, the moment will come when what has been held in his awareness moves into his action. And when that day comes, the thing that is born from your years of praying will carry the fingerprints of God so clearly that no one will be able to look at it and say it came from anything but him. You prayed it into being. You waited it into readiness. And what comes out of this season of barrenness will serve purposes larger than your personal longing, purposes that stretch further than you can see, purposes that are connected to God's larger plans for the people around you and the generations that will follow. Keep praying. Keep going to the house of God, even when it hurts to be there. Keep bringing the ache, the tears, the years of unanswered longing. Pour it out before God. Name your request. Make your vow. Surrender the answer before you receive it, and trust that the God who heard Hannah in the tabernacle at Shiloh still hears you now. The God who fills the empty. Hannah's story begins and ends with the same truth. God is in the business of filling what is empty. He fills empty wombs with children who will change history. He fills empty prayers with answers that go beyond what was asked. He fills empty years with meaning that can only be seen in retrospect. He fills empty hearts with a praise so full that it spills over into prophecy. Hannah came to Shiloh empty year after year. She left Shiloh one year carrying in her body the answer to her prayer. She returned to Shiloh a few years later and left her greatest treasure there. And she went home singing. Not because everything was easy, not because the sacrifice wasn't real, not because leaving Samuel didn't cost her something that cannot be quantified. She went home singing because she had discovered something about God that no amount of fullness could have taught her in the way that emptiness had. She had discovered that he hears. She had discovered that he answers. She had discovered that he is worthy of surrender. She had discovered that the thing you give back to God does not disappear. It multiplies. It echoes. It reverberates. It becomes a prophet. It anoints a king. It shapes a nation. It echoes in the song of a virgin mother 1,000 years later. It whispers through the centuries to every barren woman, every empty-handed person, every person who sat in the tabernacle of their life with moving lips and no voice, and poured out everything they had to a God they were not sure was listening. He was listening. He is always listening. And yours could be the prayer that changes everything. Perhaps you were made to pray this prayer. The story of Hannah is not just history. It is an invitation. An invitation to bring the unanswered prayer back to God one more time. To go back to the house of God, even when it costs something to be there. To pour out the bitterness and the longing and the years of waiting without pretending it hasn't been long. To say, God, I still believe you hear. I still believe you answer. I am still here. I am still asking. And whatever you give me, I give back to you. That is the prayer that changes things. Not because of the formula, or the fervor, or the length, or the eloquence, but because behind it is a heart that has been broken enough to be truly surrendered. And God does extraordinary things with surrendered hearts. He did it with Hannah, a woman from Ramah, with empty arms and a heart full of prayer, who prayed for a child and got a prophet, who prayed for herself and unlocked a future she couldn't see, who gave away what she loved most and received more than she had asked for, who sang a song in a tabernacle that Mary would still be singing 1,000 years later, who was overlooked and provoked and grieved and forgotten by the world, but never once, not for a single moment, forgotten by God. Perhaps you too are carrying a prayer that feels too private, too personal, too small for heaven's attention. Perhaps the longing you have lived with for so long has begun to feel like a permanent condition rather than a season of preparation. Perhaps Penina has been winning lately. The voice, the comparison, the wound that keeps being reopened. Bring it to the house of God. Pour it out. Give it everything you have. And trust the God who closed Hannah's womb and then opened it with a prophet inside, to know exactly what he is doing with yours. Because the God who heard a woman crying in a tabernacle in Shiloh still hears every prayer spoken in the darkness, still moves in the silence, still fills what is empty, still remembers, still answers. And your name has not been forgotten. Not for a moment. Not ever. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. 1 Samuel 1:27.